On that particular morning, the studio lights felt brighter than usual. At least, that's how it seemed to me. The familiar live set hummed with a heavy sense of anticipation as the cameras clicked on, the coffee warmed, and the audience settled into their seats. Something was different, even though everything looked the same. Kelly Ripa sat at her desk and smiled, as she always did, but this time it felt fixed, distant, almost hollow. Mark Consuelos, her husband, co-host, and longtime partner, moved into place beside her with practiced ease. On the surface, he appeared calm, but his hands betrayed him. His knuckles were pale, clenched so tightly they seemed unable to conceal the tension beneath. At home, viewers sensed it immediately. There was a shadow in the room. Kelly swallowed hard. As the teleprompter rolled, she stopped reading. The studio fell into a long, unsettling silence. Finally, she spoke, her voice trembling as she said, "Okay. This isn't easy." A murmur rippled through the audience. Mark turned toward her, concern etched across his face. He reached for her hand, gently squeezing her palm, silently telling her, "I'm here." But when Kelly looked into his eyes, her own filled with emotions she could no longer contain. Across the country, viewers watched as Kelly broke down in tears on live television. It was a pivotal moment. For decades, Kelly Ripa had been a steady presence, bright, energetic, composed under pressure. Even during emotionally charged interviews or difficult farewells, she managed to keep her balance. But this was different. This wasn't a segment. This wasn't rehearsed emotion. This was real. As the audience sat in stunned silence, Kelly wiped her cheek and admitted she was struggling to find the right words. "Our lives have always been shared with you," she said. "The funny moments, the embarrassing ones, the beautiful chaos. But today feels different. Today matters more." Mark's jaw tightened as he slowly shook his head. The cameras caught the rise and fall of his chest as he took a steadying breath. "Our family has been quietly working through something we're about to talk about, something that changed the way we think about time, health, and each other." Her voice faltered, an unexpected medical diagnosis. Kelly's eyes brimmed as she turned fully toward Mark. When we first heard the word diagnosis, it felt like the ground gave way beneath us. Soft gasps echoed through the studio. Mark wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm but filled with feeling. "We're not here to cause alarm, and we're not here for sympathy. We're here because this show has always been built on honesty and transparency." Kelly nodded, pressing a hand to her chest. "There are moments when you think you're ready for anything, and then life reminds you how fragile you really are." She paused, unable to continue. Suddenly, everything rushes in. Every joke, every argument, every "I'll deal with it later" that once felt insignificant. The word diagnosis carries a weight that unsettles everyone who hears it. In the days that followed, Kelly later shared, she lay awake at night staring at the ceiling while Mark slept beside her. Sometimes she watched his chest rise and fall, silently wishing this could all be nothing more than a frightening misunderstanding. Mark squeezed her hand again. Fear doesn't ask permission, she realized. It simply arrives. Together they spoke about doing everything they could to keep life normal for their children, to show up to work with smiles, to tease each other over dinner, to protect some sense of routine. Yet the silence at home felt louder than ever. Kelly's shoulders shook as she covered her face, crying openly. Instead of applause, the studio audience rose to their feet in a spontaneous standing ovation. Mark stood as well, wrapping her in a protective embrace. Kelly's fear, Mark's strength. Once Kelly had steadied herself, Mark took over. "I try to focus on the positives. I believe in facing things head on, but nothing prepared me for seeing the fear in Kelly's eyes." His voice dropped as he turned to her.
That's when I truly understood how vulnerable love can be when the person you love most is hurting. Kelly looked up at him, fighting tears. You're not supposed to be the strong one. That's my job. The audience laughed gently through their tears. When asked why they chose to speak about it publicly, Kelly's answer was simple. Because there are people sitting alone right now, checking their phones, pretending they're okay when they're not. Silence can be incredibly lonely.
She took a long breath. If this helps even one person feel less alone, then it's worth a few tears. Mark nodded. Life is uncertain, he said, but love doesn't disappear. What lingered wasn't the unpredictability of the diagnosis, it was the sincerity. The world watched as Kelly Ripa, known for her wit and warmth, allowed herself to fall apart. Within minutes, social media erupted. Clips spread rapidly. Messages poured in, overwhelmingly kind, grateful, and supportive. Watching Kelly cry made me feel seen, one viewer wrote. Mark's presence gave me hope, said another. This wasn't television, a third added. This was humanity. Near the end of the show, Kelly looked directly into the camera. I don't know what tomorrow holds, she said, but I do know this. I'm going to love harder, live louder, and savor every second. Mark smiled softly, promising to keep holding her hand. They clasped hands once more as the audience stood again, this time not for spectacle, but for truth. The applause followed them even after the studio lights dimmed. Backstage, Kelly and Mark walked hand in hand through the narrow hallway. Crew members hesitated, unsure whether to hug them, speak, or give them space. Some simply nodded. Others whispered, "We're with you." Kelly tried to stop crying, but the tears kept coming, as though her body had finally allowed itself to stop performing. She collapsed onto the couch in the dressing room, exhausted but laughing softly. I didn't plan to cry like that. Mark brushed her hair back as he knelt in front of her. You didn't plan on being that brave, he whispered. They sat in silence for a long time. What we shared today changed something, Kelly finally said. Do you think we shared too much? Mark shook his head. No, I think we finally had a real conversation. Messages began pouring in. Kelly's phone buzzed nonstop. Friends, colleagues, strangers. One message stopped her cold. I'm sitting in a hospital parking lot. I'm scared to go inside. Seeing you cry made me feel less alone. Thank you. Kelly handed the phone to Mark, her hands trembling. This, she said, this is why. Mark read the message slowly, his eyes misting. Then it was worth it. More messages followed, stories of fear, diagnoses, sleepless nights. Instead of feeling exposed, Kelly and Mark felt connected. That night, something shifted at home. The walls were the same, the laughter echoed just as before, but the air felt fragile, like fine china that could shatter with a careless touch. Dinner wasn't rushed, stories lingered, laughter paused, replaced by long looks across the table. Kelly watched Mark's hands as he spoke, moving in that familiar way. She had once believed moments like this were endless. Now she knew better. Later, lying in bed, Kelly finally asked the question she'd been avoiding. Are you scared? She whispered. Mark stared at the ceiling. Sometimes, he admitted. Not just about now, but about everything. The diagnosis hadn't arrived with drama. It came quietly during a calm phone call on a Tuesday afternoon. What began as a routine screening turned into a maze of appointments, specialists, and medical binders. Mark spent nights under a desk lamp studying terminology and statistics. Kelly struggled to focus during meetings. The diagnosis became something physical in their home, sharp, delicate, impossible to ignore. Their children, Joaquin, Lola, and Michael, were the first to notice the change. The familiar chaos softened. Laughter lingered a little longer, as if everyone sensed what was at stake. And through it all, love remained, fragile, fierce, and unmistakably real.